Warning, what you're about to hear was never meant to be public. In New York City, millions use the subway every single day. It's the lifeblood of the city, a network of steel veins pumping people from one place to another. But after midnight, after the crowds thin and the last echoes of the day fade away, there is something the trains refuse to take with them. A man who never boards, a man who never moves, a man who stands in the darkest corner of the platform. Just the back of a dark coat and hands held rigidly at his sides. No phone, no bag, no movement at all. Hector's first thought was that the man was sick, maybe drunk or having a medical emergency. He cautiously approached, calling out, "Hey, buddy, you okay? Need some help?" The words just echoed in the empty station. The man didn't flinch, not a twitch. Then, the rumble of an approaching train filled the tunnel. The lights swept across the platform, illuminating the still figure. Supervisors, annoyed by the repeated reports, decided to pull the CCTV footage. They rewound the tapes, night after night, and there he was, always after midnight, always in that same corner, always facing the wall. At first, it just seemed like a strange but harmless habit, maybe a street performer practicing his routine. But then, one of the more detail-oriented operators, a woman named Sharon, decided to go through the footage frame by frame. What she found turned annoyance into genuine fear. An inch to the left, then another. It was a slow, unnatural rotation, like he was listening to something deep inside the concrete and steel. Soon, the stories weren't just coming from transit workers. Late-night passengers, the few who braved the subway in the dead of night, began sharing their own unsettling encounters online. On a forum dedicated to strange city sightings, a post appeared. A young woman, a student heading home from a late study session, described waiting for the last train. She saw the man in the corner but didn't think much of it and stood a few feet behind him, scrolling on her phone. But as she waited, she felt this intense, suffocating pressure in her chest. The air grew heavy, thick. She described it as feeling like someone was standing right behind her, inches from her back, their presence so immense it felt like it was physically crushing her. She didn't dare turn around. She just ran onto the train the second the doors opened. Another story came from a commuter, a musician carrying a guitar case. Not words, just a whisper. A dry, rattling exhalation, like sand scraping against paper. It seemed to come from the man, but his body hadn't moved. The musician hurried his pace, but as he moved away, he swore he felt the tips of cold fingers brush the back of his coat. A light, deliberate touch. He spun around, his heart pounding. But the man was still in the corner, still facing the wall, still perfectly, unnaturally still. The musician didn't wait for the train. He ran up the stairs and took a cab he couldn't afford. Back in the control rooms, the transit technicians noticed another pattern, one that defied technical explanation. Every single time the figure appeared on camera, the system would glitch. Not a full shutdown, but small, disturbing errors. A few frames would drop out of the recording. The audio feed, which normally picked up the ambient hum of the station, would suddenly cut to complete silence for a few seconds. It was as if his presence was warping the technology around him, a localized glitch in reality itself. One senior technician, a man who'd seen every technical issue imaginable, claimed he saw the impossible. While trying to fix the time sync issue, he was scrubbing through the footage. In the very next frame, just a fraction of a second later, the footage briefly showed the man standing right in front of the camera, his form a blurry, distorted shape filling the entire lens. And in the frame after that, he was back in the corner. No movement was recorded between those points. They denied everything. A spokesperson gave a press conference, claiming the footage was misinterpreted, a combination of lens flare, pixelation, and shadows. They insisted that no such individual exists. They called the stories an urban legend, a product of late-night paranoia. In order to shut down and reposition every single CCTV camera that pointed directly into those dark, tiled corners on the late-night platforms. What are they trying to hide? Or who are they trying to avoid seeing? Part 2 begins now. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark. Before he notices you noticed him. Have you ever been on a subway platform late at night, when the usual hustle and bustle has faded to an eerie quiet? It's just you, the hum of the tracks, and the flickering lights. Across various city transit systems, a strange phenomenon is whispered about among late-night commuters and transit workers. A man, always dressed in simple, outdated clothing, seen standing motionless in the corner of a platform, facing the wall. Most passengers just walk by, maybe giving him a strange look, assuming he's just another city eccentric. But those who work the late shifts, the ones who see things others don't, they know the truth is far more unsettling. The first official mention of the cornerman appeared in a restricted incident report, leaked years ago by an anonymous transit employee. The report detailed dozens of sightings, all consistent. A solitary man, facing a tiled wall, completely still. At first, authorities dismissed it as a recurring prank or a series of unrelated coincidences. But one entry in the report, a single line scrawled by a horrified investigator, changed everything. This bizarre statement sent a small, unofficial team of investigators down a rabbit hole. They pulled the original blueprints of the oldest subway stations, the ones where the cornerman was most frequently sighted. What they found was impossible. Behind several of the walls where the figure was seen standing, the blueprints showed maintenance corridors. Not just any corridors, but ones that had been sealed off and bricked up for decades, some as far back as the 1950s. They were officially listed as non-existent, empty spaces entombed within the station's concrete skeleton. Yet, according to the sightings, something was happening in those corners, something that made a man stand and stare into solid tile, as if it were a window. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a maintenance worker, a veteran with 20 years of service, who thought he'd seen it all. His orders were simple: check the integrity of the seal, make sure it was still secure. He pried open the rusted hatch, expecting to see solid brick and concrete behind it. Instead, he was met with darkness. He reported an immediate and overwhelming sense of pressure, a physical force pushing against him, like standing at the mouth of a vast, deep tunnel, swept by a silent wind. He said the air that seeped out felt wrong. It was cold, stagnant, and unnervously still, too quiet. He shone his flashlight into the opening, but the beam was swallowed by the blackness. It didn't illuminate anything, it just vanished. But it wasn't coming from the dark corridor in front of him. It was directly behind his ear. He never turned to look. He slammed the hatch shut, locked it, and walked off the job that very night. He never set foot in a subway station again. He told a friend he'd rather face a speeding train than whatever was standing behind him in that corner. But what about the passengers? Surely someone must have tried to interact with this silent sentinel. For years, the answer was no. Most people were too unsettled, too unnerved by his unnatural stillness to approach. But then came the story of a college student. Let's call her Maya. Maya was waiting for the last train home after a late study session. The platform was deserted, except for a man standing in the far corner, facing the wall. She'd heard the stories from a friend who worked for the transit authority, dismissing them as urban legends. Seeing him there, she wasn't scared. She was curious. An art student, she found his posture oddly compelling, like a piece of performance art. So, she did what no one else had dared to do. She walked over and stood a few feet behind him. She waited. 1 second, 10 seconds, a full minute passed. The air grew heavy, and a strange feeling washed over her. It wasn't fear, she insisted later, but an intense, magnetic pull of curiosity. Fighting the strange sensation, she leaned in slightly and whispered, "Are you okay?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the man's head tilted. Not slowly, but with a sharp, unnerving crack of vertebrae. It was the first movement anyone had ever seen him make, and then, his mouth moved. Maya didn't hear a voice, not with her ears. Instead, a thought, clear as a bell, bloomed inside her own mind. A thought that was distinctly not hers. It was cold, ancient, and utterly commanding. It said, "Stand still." Primal terror finally kicked in. Maya didn't wait for a second command. She ran. She didn't look back. just sprinted up the stairs and burst out into the night air, her heart hammering against her ribs. The station's security cameras captured the whole thing. They show her talking to the man, then suddenly bolting up the stairs as if her life depended on it. And the corner man. He remained perfectly still, facing the wall, as if nothing had happened. Later that night, while scrolling through her phone, trying to calm her nerves, Maya found something she didn't remember taking, a single photo. It must have been an accident, her thumb hitting the shutter button in her panic. The photo was blurry, taken from a low angle, pointing up towards the corner. It didn't capture the man directly, but it did capture his reflection in the polished floor tiles. In the reflection, the man was still there, facing forward. But what he was facing wasn't the reflection of the tiled wall. It was an abyss, a vast, endless black space that stretched into infinity. A void, reflected in the floor, where solid concrete should have been. So what is the corner man? A ghost? A warning? But from a retired subway engineer, a man who spent his life mapping the arteries of the city's underbelly. He doesn't believe the man is a threat at all. He believes he's a guardian, a warden. The engineer claims that the sealed corridors aren't empty. They are prisons. And the corner man isn't watching the station. He's watching something trapped behind the walls. According to his theory, the corner man stands in the corner, not to hide, but to hold a position. He faces the wall to keep his attention fixed on whatever is in there, keeping it contained. The moment he turns, the moment his focus is broken, the gate is opened. The corner man doesn't follow you. He simply steps aside. He makes room for what does. So, a word of advice. If you're ever riding the subway late at night, and you see someone standing motionless in a corner, facing the wall, leave them alone. Cross to the other side of the platform. Don't stand behind them. Don't speak to them. And whatever you do, don't wait to see if they turn around, because you might not be afraid of him, but you should be terrified of what he's looking at. This has been Tales of the Dark. Thank you for listening. Subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Before the last train leaves the station for good.